All right, so this is the warm-up for lesson 3.3. It is on page 30 in your workbook. So the first two problems you should be able to do. So it is a good idea to go ahead and pause and try these. This is just a review of what we did in the 3.2 lesson. So we have a regular multiplying by distributing where you can set up a box. And then we've got expanding a binomial to the fourth power where you can use Pascal's triangle. So I think it's a great idea to go ahead and pause this video, try those, come back and see how you did. Otherwise, I will walk through them step by step too for those that need it. Okay, so looking at the first one here, I've got a polynomial times a polynomial. So I'm going to do it with the distributing method here. So this 2x has to be multiplied by all three pieces. So 2x times negative x squared is negative 2x to the third. 2x times 5x is 10x squared. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. All right, next we'll move on to the negative 3 that has to be multiplied by all three. So negative 3 times negative x squared. Negative times the negative is positive, so positive 3x squared. Negative 3 times 5x would be negative 15x. And negative 3 times negative 4 would be positive 12. Okay, so last step is to combine like terms. So I'm going to start with my highest exponent. So there's only one term with x to the third. So I've got negative 2x to the third. Next up, we've got 10x squared and 3x squared to combine for 13x squared. All right, next I move on to my x pieces. So I've got negative 8x and negative 15. Negative 8 and negative 15 gives me negative 23x. And my last piece, the 12, was the only constant or the term without an x. So we have plus 12 on the end. Okay, next up here, I have a binomial to the fourth power. This is where we're going to use Pascal's triangle. So I'm looking back. This is page 26 where they gave us that chart. So anytime I'm raising something to the fourth, or a binomial to the fourth power, I can look at this line here. So I've got x to the fourth plus 4a x to the third and so on. So we need to recognize what a is in this question. Sorry. All right, so here, since it's x minus 3, a is equal to negative 3. So I'm going to follow, sorry, trying to find the right page. There we go. This formula that they gave us. And anywhere that I see an A, I'm going to put negative 3. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a quick picture of it so we can bring it over to this page and follow it. There. Okay, so I'm going to write this out, and everywhere I see an A, I'm going to put negative 3. Okay, so x to the fourth plus 4. A is negative 3, x to the third, plus, now I'm on to the third piece here, 6, a squared, so negative 3 squared, x squared, on to the next piece, plus 4, a to the third, so negative 3 to the third, x plus negative 3 to the fourth. Okay, so we've got everything plugged in. Last thing we need to do is simplify. That's a plus sign. Okay, so x to the fourth comes down just as it is. Plus here, so this negative 3 is not being raised to a power at all. So I can go ahead and multiply the 4 and the negative 3. Okay, so that's going to be negative 12. So I'm going to go ahead and erase my plus sign and write this as minus 12 x to the third. All right, next up, I do have this negative 3 being squared. So I have to multiply, or excuse me, raise negative 3 to the second power before I multiply by 6. Okay, negative 3 to the second is a positive 9 because a negative times a negative is a positive. Now I can do 6 times 9 is 54. So plus 54x squared. Okay, next up, negative 3 is being raised to the third power. So negative 3 times negative 3 would be positive 9, times another negative 3 would be negative 27. So 4 gets multiplied by the negative 27 then. Okay, so that's going to be a negative 108, I believe, off the top of my head. And then we have that x still. And then last, negative 3 to the 4th power. So if I multiply a negative by itself 4 times, it's going to end up being positive, right? Negative times a negative is a positive, times a negative is negative, times the last negative ends up being positive, and 3 to the 4th is 81. Okay, so those are 2 problems that you should have known or been able to at least get a good way through them since we just did those. These next 2 here are something you have probably not done since Algebra 1. All right, so factoring. There are lots and lots of different ways to factor. So I will show you the way I do it. If you remember factoring from Algebra 1 and you had a method that your teacher taught you that really stuck with you, you are welcome to use that still, but I'll be doing everything the way I do it. Okay, so the idea of factoring is that I want to figure out what 2 factors, right? What 2 sets of parentheses, that when I multiply them together, I get x squared plus 10x plus 25. All right, so the way we do this with a trinomial, so we call this a trinomial because it has 3 pieces. We've got our x squared piece, our x piece, and then our constant. Okay, so we look at the coefficients out in front of these as a, b, c. So like we say here, it's really 1x squared, so that's a, 10 is b, c is 25. All right. So first thing we want to look at is a times c. So in this case, a times c would be 1 times 25, which is just 25. All right, and then I want to think of what things can I multiply together to get 25? Well, there's 1 and 25, right? These are called the factors, and 5 and 5. All right, so we want to pick the pair that when I add them together, I get whatever b is. Well, here, 5 plus 5 is 10, which is what b is. All right, so this is my winning pair here. Okay, so when I factor this, I'm going to think about this as x squared plus, I'm going to think about 10x as being 5x plus 5x. And we have the plus 25. Okay, so these factors over here tell us what to split b into. So we're splitting it into 5x and 5x. Okay, then we're going to go to the box. So this is the box like we used for multiplying. Okay, only the difference here is we know what we end up with inside of the box. We don't know what we started with on the outside. Okay, the opposite is true when we use the box to multiply. So these are our 4 pieces that go in. So x squared, 5x, and 5x. This is just so happens that they're the same this time. That's not going to happen every time. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at each column and each row and see what we can take out. So if I look at this first column, x squared and 5x, I can take an x out of both of those. The next column, 5x and 25, I can take a 5 out of both of those. I can't take out an x because 25 doesn't have an x. All right, first row, x squared and 5x, they both have an x in common, so I can take that out. 5x and 25, I can take out a 5. Okay, so whatever we were left with along the top and along the side, those are our factors. All right, so this would be x, and since the 5 is positive, it's plus 5. If we did a negative, it'd be minus 5. Okay, so that comes from the top, and here it just so happens that the one down the side is the same. And now is going to happen. Okay, so this is our final answer. This is factored form. That means if I were to multiply this out, right, do x times x, x times 5, 5 times x, 5 times 5, I would end up with x squared plus 10x plus 25. That's what it means to factor. Figure out what 2 factors, when I multiply them together, do I get what I started with. Okay, let's do one more. So if you're feeling confident, you can go ahead and pause and try this one and come back and see how you did. Otherwise, I'll walk you through it. Okay, so first step is to look at a times c. Okay, so here a is 1, right, because it's 1x squared. C is the constant, or 12 in this case. So 1 times 12 is, of course, 12. So then I'm thinking about my factors of 12. There's 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4, and that's it. So you don't always have to list them all out. Sometimes you might recognize right away what you need. All right, so here we have a negative 8x in the middle that I need to split up. All right, so the x is negative. The 8x is negative. Now, when I look at these, when I add them up, I get 13, 8, and 7. None of those are negative. But I did get an 8 here, which is what I wanted. So what we have to think about as well, if I make both of these negative, negative 2 and negative 6 is still negative 8. Negative 2 times negative 6 still gives me that positive 12. So this is the pair that works here. So we can introduce negatives as long as they still multiply to give us whatever a times c was. All right, so we're splitting this now into negative 2x and negative 6x. Okay, so when we go to our box, we've got x squared, negative 2x, negative 6x, and 12. All right, so x squared, negative 2x, negative 6x, and 12. Okay, so again, we look at each column and each row and see what we can take out. So x squared and negative 6x. Okay, since this piece doesn't have a number, I can't take a number out, but they both do have at least one x, so I can pull out an x. Next up here, I've got negative 2x and 12. So there's no x on this piece, so I can't take a variable out, but I could take negative 2 out of both of those. Another way to think about it is what can I divide both of them by? All right, first row then, x squared and negative 2x. Same thing, I can only take an x out because this one doesn't have a number or a coefficient. And my second row, negative 6x and 12. I can divide both 12 and 6 by 6. Since this one is negative, we'll say negative 6. Okay, so here's my first factor, and here is my second factor. All right, so when I go to write this in factored form, I'm going to say x minus 2, x minus 6. Just as a side note, it doesn't matter what order you write these in. You could have wrote x minus 6 first. Same up here, if you did negative 6 first and then negative 2, so they were flipped up in here, doesn't matter. It's multiplying. No matter what order we multiply, and we get the same thing. Okay, so next up, you guys are going to work on pages 31 and 32 here. So this is the beginning of our lesson on dividing, which starts with factoring that we just looked at. Okay, so you guys can read through this. And you are going to be factoring a few here. So in number 2, A, B, C, and D, that's where you're practicing the factoring, which is what we just did in our warm-up on numbers 3 and 4. All right, so go ahead and give that a try. Give it your best. And if you have questions for me, you can definitely ask them when I return.